And the Corpus Christi Police Department is continuing to monitor state-mandated capacity levels at establishments throughout the holidays, of course, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's a heavy focus right now on bars. In fact, CCPD has 2 officers dedicated to check on businesses every night, visiting about 12 to 15 a day to look for violations like capacity limits and non-mask wearing. Deputy Chief Billy Breedlove says a majority of establishments are following the rules, but they have come across a few repeat offenders, and while the officers can offer education on the matter, the TABC can take stronger measures.
We've had just warning citations, but we have sent some violations to TABC, to bars that are violated, because they have certain laws that they have to follow and guidelines by TABC to have a liquor license.
Breedlove said they began the bar checks back on October 6th, and since then they have conducted over 1,300 checks to date.